Today I want to talk to you about the Puritans and the first Thanksgiving. You remember when you were in elementary school and it was time for Thanksgiving and your teachers had you make those handprint turkeys, okay? You would take it home and give it to your mom. And then they had you make construction paper pilgrim hats, and you wore those in a little Thanksgiving play. That was fun, but most of the things they told you back then, it was wrong. You know that not everybody aboard the Mayflower was a pilgrim. There were about 100 people on that ship, and only about a third of them were actually pilgrims. The rest of them, people that didn't care anything about religion or religious liberty. They just wanted out of England for one reason or another, to start a new life. They weren't even supposed to land in Massachusetts. They were supposed to go to Virginia. The Jamestown colony was already there. It's actually starting to thrive by 1620. But a storm in the Atlantic blew them north, and they landed in Massachusetts. That's why they had to write the Mayflower Compact. The Mayflower Compact was a document that meant they would all agree to work together. And Massachusetts wasn't really a wilderness. It was already home to the Wampanoag Indians. Since about the 1580s, English sailors had been bringing their ships up along the coast of New England. They would do some whaling, they would do some fishing, but they also would lure Native Americans out to their ships, and then they would kidnap them. One of those that they kidnapped was somebody that we know as Squanto. He was kidnapped, taken to England, spent many years there. I think people are not quite sure how long. He learned English, and then he became an interpreter on another English ship that came back. And there was another Wampanoag Indian by the name of Samoset. He also knew how to speak English. And so he was one of two interpreters to the Wampanoag chief Osamequin, and they were able to tell him, be careful around these English. And so he did. He didn't just take his group and run out to the English and help them survive. He hung back. He stayed back and he watched them from November of 1620 all the way to March of 1621. And then he decided to approach them. The reason he approached them was not because he wanted to help them survive. He wanted a military alliance. You see, those English that had already been sailing along the coast, well, they were close enough that they brought European diseases to North America, diseases that the New England Indians had no immunity to. The tribe was being decimated by illness. They didn't know what it was, and they couldn't do anything about it. We, of course, know it's European disease. But in the end, the Wampanoag society, their population numbers had been cut so drastically that the neighboring Narragansetts were starting to move in on their territory. In March of 1621, when Osamequin decided to actually approach the English, he did it as a political measure. He wanted to see if he could ally with the English. The English, not too big in number, but they did have guns, and that was intimidating. Of course, the English wanted something in return. They wanted help planting. They wanted help hunting. Osamequin said, sure, we can do that. And they come up with a mutual alliance. This thing is for the benefit of both. Now, they may have had something of a feast to commemorate that. If they did, that's as close as they got to a first Thanksgiving. In 1769, okay, there was a group in Plymouth, Massachusetts, that wanted to boost their tourism in 1769. So they started to play up the fact that there was a religious ceremony, the first Thanksgiving, and they wanted people to come there and celebrate it. By 1827, a woman named Sarah Hale, who was an editor for Godey's magazine, which was an early women's magazine, started a campaign for a National Thanksgiving Day. She wanted to capitalize on those same traits that the founding story had. And she thought we needed a National Thanksgiving. Well, this falls on deaf ears until 1863. What's going on in 1863? Oh yeah, Civil War. When Abraham Lincoln went to Gettysburg in November of 1863 to dedicate the Gettysburg National Memorial Cemetery, he also had planned for the very next week a Thanksgiving celebration. And by the end of 1863, when it looked like the Union was finally winning the Civil War, that we could use a day of Thanksgiving. And so it gets set. It gets uniformly set at the tail end of November. When we get into the Depression, the 1930s, 1939 to be specific, Franklin D. Roosevelt took Thanksgiving, left it on Thursday, but he moved it back a week because he wanted there to be an extra week of Christmas shopping. FDR, the New Deal, stimulate the economy, more Christmas shopping, and he used Thanksgiving to do it.
Hey everybody, and that's it for me. Miranda's got it from here.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you've watched it, if you joined late and didn't catch all of it, you should. Well, I've got it posted other places on Facebook, but you can watch our broadcast here again. It's at the very beginning, but it's a video we made in one of my video classes that worked with the history department here, and they did the truth about Thanksgiving, or the first Thanksgiving. And we're talking about doing like a little bit of remembrance and stuff, and I thought, we just had Thanksgiving and remembering Thanksgiving, and so I thought it kind of went along with what we were talking about. Anyway, yeah, so it was quite eye-opening for me, things that I never heard about in the history of Thanksgiving. But I hope you had a good Thanksgiving. What did you have for Thanksgiving dinner? I had Robitussin.
It's true.
Robitussin and Dayquil. Yum, yum.
He had a good Thanksgiving.
I did have a good. It's my first diabetic Thanksgiving. I did a post on that as well. It was good. We had Japanese chicken, Philippine chicken,
Persian
Asian
chicken.
Persian
chicken.
It was Persian chicken, and it was yummy. And I like turkey. I'm not. Oh, we gotta have turkey. That's it. Turkey. I like some turkey. I mean, like, turkey that's okay. But Aspen wanted chicken, and so I know that's fine. And this is a new one. I don't think you made this before.
No, but there was a little Persian restaurant in Lincoln, and so Aspen wanted to try to replicate their chicken. How close did that come? How close did that recipe come?
I'd say pretty darn close.
Pretty close?
Yeah, I'd say pretty darn close.
Well, this recipe actually called to add some mayonnaise to the marinade, and I didn't add the mayonnaise, but apparently it was still pretty tasty.
And yeah, it was good. I think you use better chicken than they do. Your chicken was grass-fed and non-GMO and non-HBO and non-Cinemax. It was good chicken. And I had mashed potatoes, and Miranda always makes the best mashed potatoes. And
I just have to agree with that.
That was good.
It's one thing that I generally fix pretty well.
Pretty darn well. They're always gone at all the potlucks. That and monkey bread and whatever that roast was.
Special K loaf?
I don't remember. Whatever you made, they used to scoop it out.
Oh, tater tot casserole.
Tater tot casserole. That's it.
I used to take it in a big container that would actually held the equivalent of two 9 by 13 inch pans, and it always was gone, and people would have eaten more if I'd have taken more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some people love tater tot casserole, and then others don't.
Yep.
But.
And something like I had chicken, potatoes, and a roll.
Mm-hmm.
That was
dinner
right?
roll and gravy and deviled eggs.
Deviled eggs, that was it.
Yes.
I couldn't remember the other deviled eggs.
Yeah. Had to keep everything at a minimum because Brett can only have 50 carbs. So.
Yeah. So Brett will never overeat at Thanksgiving again.
He also had a little bit of key lime pie filling.
Mm-hmm.
That was made with stevia instead of sugar.
It's good.
So it was pretty low carb.
Mm-hmm. Now, what I used to have growing up was turkey, mashed potatoes, corn, sweet potatoes with the brown sugar and marshmallow on top, and broad noodles.
And rice.
And pumpkin, apple, whatever, in different pies. That's what Mom made when we were growing up, and Mama, my grandmother, and then so big. And then when I was a few years, I was vegetarian. As the only vegetarian in the family, I got fried chicken instead of, which everybody ate, and turkey, because they all like fried chicken, and they ate it, and I was mad because I didn't get turkey, and I think they were trying to force me to eat turkey. And anyway, but those days are gone now. They're a long, distant memory that shall never be again.
That's good for his health.
Yeah, it was. Anyway, it's. I was gonna say I was never that big on it. It was good. Don't get me wrong, it was good. I like the broad noodles and everything. But I'm just not married to any real one food. I've got to have that one food. It's I've never been that way with Thanksgiving or Christmas. It's just like good food's good food, and this chicken was great.
And it wouldn't be the same without mashed potatoes.
And mashed potatoes is just because Miranda's so good at making them. All right, so I think we've given everyone enough time to find us rambling on about stuff.
We probably have.
But yes, Thanksgiving is a fun time, good meal. And did you tell them about the key lime?
Yes, the key lime pie made with stevia instead of sugar.
Key lime pudding. So we eat Thanksgiving dinner to remember the first Thanksgiving, which was fake, and to be thankful we remember. And there's the segue into today's topic.
Okay, well, that doesn't really go with the very first thing we're talking about.
I'm not all here.
Yeah,
that was as good as I can do.
It's true. I did offer Brett, we didn't have to do it this week.
But we always do that. I don't want to cancel,
And so, because we actually did stay home from Sabbath school and church today. Because,
well, most of us did.
Well, yeah.
Somebody had to go.
Well, Brett has been nursing a cold all week long, basically. So I had to stay home with him.
Yes.
And then, Aspen did. She got up and we took her to Sabbath school and such. So it was a good thing because she provided our intro.
Opening story.
Yes.
Provided by Aspen.
Right. So when she went to Sabbath school, they had a young man as a guest speaker who goes to Southwestern Adventist University.
Oh, he was
right
a
here.
guest speaker.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was just okay.
Yeah. And apparently, how do you say the name of that church?
He is an Anglican.
Okay. So he grew up in the Anglican church, and someone asked him, "Well, what do you think about being an Adventist, right, or something like that?" And he's like, "Well, he's currently in the process of changing his belief system and stuff, maybe kind of keeping some of both, And in the meantime, he said what really surprised him the first time he went to an Adventist service, he's like, "Wait,
I'll bet I know."
What's that?
From an Anglican coming to an Adventist church?
Yeah.
He's wondering, where the heck's the communion?
He did. He's like, "Where's the communion service?"
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, that's because they do communion every service. It's like Orthodox, Catholic, Anglican, or my mom's second husband was it Anglican? Or I think it was. I can't. remember. It was Anglican or Orthodox. But anyway, same thing. They did communion for everything. And, I mean everything. Every church service, every christening, every baptism, every funeral, communion. And I was in college, I was still in college. And, being raised in the Adventist bubble, I had never been to any other church. And, communion is the only thing I'd ever done was the Adventist church. And so, in this one, it was Orthodox because they use the common chalice. That's where everybody drinks from the same cup.
Oh.
And so the pastor doing it was a woman. This was, I guess, a liberal Orthodox Anglican. But anyway, so it was small. It was like a chapel, but there was 50, 60 people, and so you go up one row at a time, and you kneel by the thing, and then they bring the cup down, and I mean they do that. You take a sip, and then they turn it, sip, turn it, sip, turn it, And so it got down to me, and I, in the Adventist bubble, did not realize that we were some of the only ones that you actually use grape juice instead of real wine, and I had never had real wine and was not expecting real wine. And so when I took it, and I just immediately hit my mouth, and I immediately spit it back out, which is really bad in communion. Apparently very bad. But she was also a youth pastor, and I was studying to be a youth pastor. I was almost, because we had talked and everything. Oh, you're a youth pastor? And so she didn't freak out. She sort of giggled, smiled, guffawed. And then apparently they have standby cups for these very types of situations because she simply took the cup and turned around and set it down and picked up another cup and continued on. And, so I embarrassed myself in the Anglican Church. I don't think I'm welcome back, at least in Anglican Tennessee churches. Don't get him in. He's a spitter.
They have Brett Hadley's name on the list of people not to allow into their church.
Big spitter underneath my picture. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, so anyways, he was used to participating in the communion service every week. And yet in the Adventist church, it's the weekend that the communion service is planned that any number of people won't show up to church. I know sometimes our Sabbath school is a little thinner on that week, and people look around and go, oh, yeah, it's communion week this week, and so that's why we don't have quite as many people. So, for whatever reason it is, sometimes I think it's possibly a foot washing service. It makes us a little uncomfortable. Maybe we don't know that many people, and who might we wash someone else's feet or participate with them, or that kind of stuff. Yeah. So for whatever reason, it's easy to avoid it rather than to participate. So last week when we were in Sabbath school, it happened to somebody touched on the communion service, and the one man towards the very, very end of Sabbath school said, I've always felt uncomfortable with the part where Jesus says, now drink this wine because it's my blood, and eat this bread because that is my body. And he personally didn't like that illustration that he said. It made him feel uncomfortable. But it was the end of Sabbath school, and so things wrapped up without really having any discussion about it. Well, when we came home, I started thinking about it and kind of thought about it through the week, and because, anyways, I just like to, since the question didn't get answered, I gave it some thought. So, anyways, we tend to go to church and, go to communion service, and I just sort of speaking from personal experience in the past, you go and you don't give it much thought. The pastor or the elders up there saying some words, and, you eat your little half-bite communion cracker and drink your little tiny thing of grape juice, and in the meantime, you're probably thinking more about, well, who am I going to participate in the foot washing service with and such like that.
Where were you born?
Where was I born? I was born in Nebraska.
So I thought.
I moved there from there when I was 3.
Yeah. Okay.
But anyways.
You say cracker. Seems like you should be from the South. Seems like someone from Lincoln, Nebraska get communion bread. But communion cracker. Maybe she's been married to me too long. So South Carolina, we do the communion crackers. And she does the communion bread, I thought. But crackers, you know.
It's true, but when you're making it, it's like a cracker.
Have you ever made it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's because
you roll it really thin, and then you score it, and it's like making a cracker.
Yeah, that's why we called it cracker in the South, because it was like, this ain't bread.
Yeah, definitely not bread. But the kids always liked it. Well, I always made extra communion bread or crackers because that stuff was tasty, and it was always fun to have our own little,
Unless you buy the stuff. Oh my gosh, man! I had to buy some in Vegas for something came up fast, or maybe it was Lincoln. But anyway, no, it was Lincoln. Whoever was going to make it ended up not making it, or came back and told us like too late to like, oh, I can't do it, and so we ordered communion bread, crackers, and it was the most tasteless thing you've ever had.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, they're just little wafers that mostly melted. And I'll shut up. I'm just telling the story. Please continue in this theological discussion.
Okay, so, in the meantime, maybe as we're sitting there just, sipping our little bit of juice and eating the cracker, instead of thinking about that, we're probably wondering who's here that I can participate in the foot washing with, right? Who do I know well enough that it won't be uncomfortable to ask them, or how long do I have to wait around for someone to ask me, or whatever, especially if it's a slightly bigger church rather than a really small one. So, anyways, I decided to take the whole, this is my blood, drink it, and here, take this bread and eat it, it's my body, and break it down, and look at it from a little different perspective, maybe. I'm still using, of course, some of the same familiar concepts that we're, familiar with. So, first of all, I want to say that the whole thing is sort of like a simple recipe. That if you're by chance out of salt in your kitchen, all you need to do is mix together some bread and some wine, and voila, you will have salt. Okay, so.
What?
Yes. We don't have any grape juice or wine, but,
I'm not. As you may know, I'm not the greatest chef. But I'm wondering about this recipe. Bread and wine, and then I'm going to get salt. It sounds like something I would do in the kitchen, trying to make, I don't know, biscuits or something.
Well, you'll see it's actually really clear.
It's going to be clear to all.
This bread and wine that Jesus served to his disciples did turn into salt, or represented salt. But let's see how that happens.
Miranda is about to explain now.
Okay, so first of all, we know that the grape juice and the communion crackers represent Jesus' death, right, for us, and it represents his living inside of us, so that we can live out his actions and not ours. And this is our salvation, right? It represented the death of Jesus, which is our salvation.
So, yes, he said, this is my blood spilled for you, and this is my body broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And he took it in. And so it was representative of what was about to happen.
Right, what was about to happen. But it was going to be
their deliverance from sin.
Yeah, their salvation.
Yeah.
Being saved is deliverance from sin.
Yeah, at the Last Supper, obviously, probably everybody knows what we're talking about, but at the Last Supper, and Jesus said this. And it was right after he washed the disciples' feet. Yeah.
Okay, so this whole thing reminded me of John 15, where Jesus says, he is the true vine, and his Father is a vine dresser. Now, I'm going to summarize this because it has a lot of verses in there. But if you want to go back and read John 15, just to make sure we got all things correct, you are more than welcome to do that.
What made you think of vine and branches? Oh, because of the grape juice?
Yeah,
juice.
Yeah, okay. So to summarize, Jesus is the vine, we're the branches, he abides in us, we abide in him, and this produces fruit. But just like a branch cannot produce fruit unless it is in the vine, we too cannot produce fruit unless we abide in Jesus. And Jesus also says in this passage that we abide in him and his words abide in us. So basically, when we live out the words of Jesus, we are living out his actions and his love for other people.
Okay, I follow that.
Okay. So he also adds later that we are to abide in his love, which just goes along with what we just said, okay? So basically, when our branch is attached to the true vine, we are attached to the love, right, of Jesus. And so when Jesus' love gets lived out through us, it produces fruit. It produces much fruit. And so find my correct notes here. This fruit that gets produced, fruit, it gets used, right? Now, it doesn't say this in this passage, but basically the grapes would probably either be eaten or pressed into wine, right? And so the fruit, the works of God, the love of God, lived out through us, because we abide in him. The fruit then gets turned into wine, which also contain our salvation, right? So here's the fruit, which is going to be wine, but the fruit in essence already contains that juice, right? So therefore it already contains our salvation.
But is it organic?
Yes.
It's very organic.
It tastes better that way.
Yes. And it's wine juice, interchangeable terms.
Right, wine juice.
For the conservative Adventists that are watching, yes.
Yes, and I'm kind of mentioning both just to include
both.
Yes,
yeah.
Because we do know it's juice,
yeah.
but the Bible says wine to be specific, and so therefore. Yes.
And there is a whole biblical study. Did you know?
Right, you've told me about that.
Yeah. So even if it, because they didn't have refrigerators, and so they would store things either in ponds or bury it or basements or stuff. And so the wine, like the new wine, could have been and when I was in UC Davis in California, they had a what do you call it when people sell stuff from their farms? Farmers market. Thank you, Aspen. And this guy was selling apple, I forget what he called it, but it had just started to turn, so it started to ferment, and I don't know, it was like 2% alcohol or something, and it was like apple juice with a little bit of a bite to it in the taste and stuff, but it was, you'd have had to drink a gallon of it to even get a buzz, but he was using the same process as they used back then, and that's what they would have called wine, a new kind of wine. It would have been grape juice or juice, but just maybe it just started to turn. The truth is the Bible doesn't, in a study of it, it's not absolutely definitive. It could be 100% juice that they just brought from the vineyard, or it could be a little bit of, just starting to turn juice that had been there for a little bit. The thing that usually gets I'm getting off on a tangent. The thing that usually gets applied that is that it was for Passover, and yeast would have been forbidden at Passover, and so there wouldn't have been wine served at the Last Supper because it would have had yeast. It would not have been that wouldn't have been appropriate at a Passover meal, and so that's why we say it was juice or this new wine that was, barely starting to turn. But so wine and juice being interchangeable terms was my point, and I will shut up now.
Okay, so back to what we were talking about. And so how does this simply get explained, okay? The fruit is produced by the words of God in us, right? And the love of God in us. The fruit is our works. When God takes those works and he turns them into wine and gives it to us to drink in remembrance of him, now we remember that it is not our good works that save us, but the death of Jesus, which creates the good works in us. And we must take up our cross, right, and follow Jesus, living out the words of Jesus, which produces the fruit and the wine of our salvation. So, as Jesus starts to wrap up this object lessons, he says we are to abide in his love, and this abiding produces fruit, right? And so, if you're in the kitchen and you're out of salt, just mix together some bread and wine and you have some salt. Because Jesus tells us to be the salt of the earth, right? We're to sprinkle the seasoning of God's love into all the situations of our life. And this is what happens when we partake of the blood and the body of Jesus. And his love lives inside of us because we are abiding in him and he's abiding in us. And so then we live that out in all the situations of our life as salt. We are sprinkling the salt of love into all those situations. And so, another thing is, it's called the service of humility, right? Communion is called the service of humility. And I think oftentimes we see, and also at the original foot washing, the washing of the feet was seen as a humiliating part of the service, right? And yet, when you really think about it, it takes utter humility of our souls on our part to drink the blood of Jesus and eat his body, to live out his words, and in doing so, we are saying, I can do nothing without you. That's actually really hard to do. So we like to think we can do all this stuff on our own. And yet, Jesus says there in that passage about I'm the vine, you're the branches, that we cannot do anything of our own unless we are abiding with him, in him. And so we cannot produce fruit without him. And so we're back here to come follow me moment. So we've done some of those, but I hadn't done any with anyone recently. The come follow me moment in the story is where Jesus says we are to drink his blood and eat his body. Jesus inside of us is going to help us remember that we cannot do anything without him. And so while we may spend the community service feeling awkward about whose feet we're going to wash, we have missed the whole point of true humility, and that is abiding in Jesus and him abiding in us.
Mm-hmm.
And this is your part. Are you still awake?
Barely.
Do this in remembrance of me.
So, I guess, so in summary, to simple, Jesus said, abide in me, my words abide in you, bear much fruit. And so the fruit that we bear comes from having, God's word in us, abiding in Jesus, and then we produce fruit. And then you were kind of connecting that to the Last Supper and to communion, where it's the, juice. However, there's as you were talking, it reminded me there's one step in between there. And you have to go from the fruit, you have to be squashed, and then you get juice.
I did think about that, but I'll have to admit I left out any number of steps to shorten the whole thing.
Shorten the whole thing. I figured because there was a bunch of stuff that there's always a bunch of leftover. But it was so interesting that it's, if you keep the analogy going, then you've got what happens to us in life that creates, gives pressure and squeezes us and what comes out. And if it's we abide in God, it's love. And so it's our response to the things that, could produce all kinds of stuff. But what comes out of us is love and God's word, because that's where we've been abiding in. And that's would be the equivalent of living out God's word, living out God's commands, doing God's will, loving others as I have loved you, as Jesus said. And that would be the juice.
Right. That would be the juice, the fresh juice, the sweet juice.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if we are not abiding in Jesus, we are producing our own fruit, basically. And that's the kind of fruit that then produces the intoxicating kind of fermented wine that is not going to produce good results in our lives.
I think it's more like, instead of grapes, you produce cranberries, and then you get cranberry juice, and you drink cranberry juice. And it's, I guess some people like cranberry juice.
Well, they could use sour grapes.
Sour grapes. Anyway, and so that's the, and then, I think the whole thing in remembrance is that, when Jesus said this, he said, do this to remember what I've done for you. And that's another thing, as we remember the thing, and remember Jesus' sacrifices, remember what God has done, then that is us abiding in him. That is that motivation. So, like, the works aren't the salvation, it's evidence of salvation, and it's a whole loop. The abiding produces works, produces love, produces deeper relationship, produces works. I mean, it's just all things, and that's what it is. Remember this, because this what it mean to. This is remember me. This is what it means to abide in me. And so I thought that's why I had remembrance in the end. So there you have it. All right. So I hope you had a great Thanksgiving, and the food that you love, and the people that you love, and the cats and dogs that you love. We don't have dogs. We have 2 cats. They do not abide in Jesus. They do not love each other.
But they love us.
They love us.
Yes, they do.
And they're getting better at tolerating each other, I guess. But, yeah, so we hope you're having a good week. And I don't know, what are we talking about next week?
Next week, I think we'll either move on to the feet, or the other thing I mentioned last week about Peter saying, "I will die with you." It was his idea of perfection. Yeah, that's the way to do it. But our ideas of perfection and how things should be done are not always God's. So one or the other. We will either expand on the foot washing thing, like we talked about last week, just a little, or probably the other. We're trying to finish up like a little series here.
And I will hopefully not be on cough syrup and cold medicine by next week.
So we hope.
Yes. We hope.
We are thankful that Brett was sick during Thanksgiving break rather than regular work time.
That's true. All right, so thanks for joining us, and hope you had a great Sabbath.